How's it going, everyone? Julian Gonzalez here. Today we're gonna now explore about this thing called Playwright and how that plays out, no pun intended, in the entire enterprise UI development. So the idea of understanding and make a quick recap of this particular course is to understand now how, for example, large code bases, big companies, how they maintain their code bases, and what are the different techniques, patterns, processes, and systems that we have to put in place to lay out the infrastructure needed to make the code maintainable over a long period of time with a wide range of contributors. Again, this is a working in progress infrastructure, an infrastructure that is going to adapt. But at least right now in 2024, 2025, January 25, 2025, this is now how at least these huge, massive code bases that you might inherit, or you perhaps the CEO wants to actually put now some sort of new features out there based on some POC, and they want to now integrate that to the main product. So you need to find a way to how you can make that maintainable over a long period of time. And again, this is just to describe is the basic infrastructure needed to put in place in our applications. So we went through describe is what is maintainability. The TLDR is that we have the ability to add, modify, migrate, and do a refactor without the fear of breaking something. All right, and because of that, there are some systems, process, and patterns that we need to know and put in practice, depending on which the state of that project are, or that application is. So that is this Maslow pyramid, where at the base, at the bottom of the pyramid we have is the system that we need to put in place to lay out the infrastructure needed for the maintainability. For example, testing, static analysis, and the build system. And then on top of that is to identify the process that we need. For example, is code review. Not a big fan of that, but a lot of the time people, and we as a senior developers needs to do that, or tech lead, code review, documentation. That this is something that there is a reason why we are actually doing that, at least in my current company, right? I'm actually documenting. There's a series of step by step of how can we now set up things, the configuration, which is something that can take a lot of time, but a lot of time. So I'm exploring this topic because here we have is the code review, the blueprints, the design documents, whether it is from the design, but also is this documentation that is needed for set up your applications, the configurations. So we went dive deep into this by looking first at the testing and how this is in a spectrum, where you have now unit testing, component testing, and integration testing in the middle, and then the E2E. We focus on unit testing and the tools that allows to do that, which is in this case is React. Okay, so React, TypeScript for this static analysis, GitHub Actions to define is the build tools, Vite for running our tests using now Jest behind the scenes, but this is now more EXIS compatible and provides some of the features out of the box. Uh, and Playwright, which is something that we're going to discuss. This is a course that took us quite a while because we have done this from October, uh, since it is involved several other topics around that we're going to discuss. But first, we look at the unit testing. What is the value proposition of unit testing? They're fast. They wants to test your JavaScript functionality. We also look at how can we use this, the Vite, particularly the how what is the unit test structure, uh, which is using now Jest behind the scenes. You can define it by E, then describe, and inside of your test, you have to define is the set of functions, all right? The testing logic, and then your assertion. This is at least one common pattern to do. So most common methods or the greatest hits in unit tests is by using is the to be equal. The difference between the to be and the to be equal is to be. Here's when the referential equality kicks in, which is to be equal. Check if those object has the same reference in memory, whereas the to equal check for deep equality in their values. And then other hits, other greater hits like to contain, to check if this element actually belong to these collections of data, to contain, to undefined, to be undefined, to be throw, to be instance of, to be match object, okay, and also to match inline object, or to match inline the expect.any, the expect.object contain, the expect.object array contain. And then how can we deal is the async nature of our JavaScript when we need to run our tests. So for example, with timers, right? And that is for unit testing. We actually wrote that, and then we need to deploy to make sure that our code works as expected. We use now the build tools like GitHub Actions. Before that, we use something called Jenkins, which is for Java applications, right? Which is this pipeline that is, again, this is exclusively for Jenkins. But the idea here is that instead of using this, we use now GitHub Actions, where by defining it's a YAML file, yet another market language, that you are going to define is the workflow that is going to now run this series of jobs by default in parallel, but you can schedule that in sequence, which is running this job or this bash script or GitHub Action, which is recurring, common, tedious bash scripts or repeated tasks, such as pulling the repo or catching the repositories in your CI environments, setting up configuration for your Azures or for Amazon or cloud vendors, and the other is setting the correct build pipeline, for example, for generating is artifacts or binary files, especially useful on mobile development. when you want to generate is now the APK or the IPA, which is, I think it is, .IPA, right? This is from Mac, right? Exactly. Or the but again, this is just extensions, file name extensions. Now, we also look at that this particular bash scripts that is executing under the jobs, they are run in no pun intended, in a runner, which is this virtual machine that GitHub provide to you, whether it is on Mac or iOS or Windows, so you can run your tests, and with that we look at how can we specify as the different pipelines, whether it is the build and the test, and because this can be quite time consuming, we want to save us time by catching dependencies. We also look at how can we do that manually and what it's doing behind the scenes, and then some convenient GitHub actions only for Node that speed up that process, right? And how now by doing that, it will hold a npm catch that will save that by 7 days on their GitHub Actions or on their CI/CD server, again. And then we define some of the different checkbox for guarantee the correct CI/CD pipeline. In other words, is to now say, hey, let's going to now do some code review. Let's going to now make some sort of security checks. So for example, let's going to protect the main branch. Let's going to do a code review and quote some of the maintainers. So the baseline of that is that this leads us to understand now more about the security and the compliance. So with security, at least to describe briefly, is what is the different models that we have. Right now we're using is the zero trust model, or this is the model that now most of these companies, even cloud vendors, are actually using, as well as the architecture called SASE, despite that it is fancy name. This SASE that stands for Secure Service Service Edge Secure Access, and then in layout is a set of principles where the idea is to ask a question: how do we connect, or how can we integrate? How can we close the gap between is the network connectivity and network security, right? And from there, they have now is several techniques to apply. Zero trust policy is one of them, which is, hey, they have also some principles, like we don't want to, we're going to continuously monitoring and doing verifications. Also, we're going to go where applies the least privilege, the principle of least privilege, as well as to continuously monitoring the device, microsegmentate the network. So if an attacker get in here and try to move from one network to another, they need to do that by providing it some sort of credentials, by running it the multi-factor authentication. This is just to briefly describe is what is this first technique of the SASE model is. Because before this, we have now the castle and moat, which essentially say, or it's a philosophy that say, hey, let's going to now assume that threats can happen only outside of the company, but but doesn't have any policies when something goes wrong or when an attacker crows them up. So they can now exploit security vulnerabilities, perform some social engineering attacks, which is actually the most effective and efficient way to steal credentials. For example, is a good example is AI scam. AI scam. Brad Pitt. Like this. This is quite recent. 10 days ago, French TV show pulled after ridicule of woman who fell for AI Brad Pitt. Annie, 53, faced wave of online mocking for believing she was in a relationship with actor and paying scammer 830k euros. You gotta be kidding me, man. I can't live with that amount of money for the next 40 years. For the next 40 years, man. Oh my God. A French woman who believes she was in a long-term relationship with Brad Pitt. The name Annie, and I think, of course, they protect that identity. Yeah, I think they protect that. Oh, this is another actress. Oh, okay, that's the. uh, Brad Pitt's scam. Anyway, yeah, and it is funny because they put a lot of the image from here and all that kind of stuff. So it seems that she is one. But if she understood or if she understand that there is no bad ads, she can actually rip all of this and turn it into a cash cow. Anyway, but yeah, this is it, not right? Brad Pitt dating scam, French woman lose. They're gonna. But again, this is something. This is real, and I laugh. But again, people want to believe what they want. So because of that, this kind of social engineering scams that are real, and if you translate it to the business, that is huge. That can be the line between that is the line. That is the sort of line between death or a life in the company, in the industry. So, because of that, now we have this SASE architecture as a way to now bring it or to close the gap between the network connectivity and security, especially in this today landscape where now we have a lot of workplace or a lot of workforce that are now much more effective at a distance, and the compelling prices of cloud computing to make that happen, right? So because this SASE model was developed by people at Gartner, this multinational, this North American multinational IT consulting firms, they developed this particular model because their client don't want to have is layers of security. They want this built-in security in their apps. So that's why they have this zero trust policy model. Is, as the name suggests, is assuming that threats not only can happen outside but also inside. And then also applying some other techniques such as secure web gateway that is going to inspect any package that pass through this and actually look at for URLs, doing some URL filtering. Hey, is this user can access to this resource? If it is, all right. If it's not, uh, pull over, kicks out the, yeah, if it's not, kick out of the API server data, API server club, kick out of it. Also, we have in the CASB, which is Cloud Access Secure Broker, which is similar as these physical security firms when you have now foot patrol, surveillance, verifications, but now is on the web or on the application, where the idea is that they're going to provide now you is data protection, threat security, monitoring or invalidations, as well as the compliance. And here the compliance is where now we again open up a new Pandora box, or at least a new branch of knowledge that again I'm going to summarize this to boil down into compliance. We can have is per industry and global. So globally, for in compliance, we can have is global and per industry. So those global or those international standards from ISO is the ISO 9001. This is for QI maintain quality management systems. So it defines a set of requirements to improve the products, provide the best customer satisfactions, and also continuously evaluating your own delivery and metrics to satisfy is the customers. That's one. And the other is in ISO IEC 27001. And this word of IEC, it stands for the Institute or International Electrotechnical Commission. I didn't know about this actually, but this is but this is quite interesting. This ISC, because now they define is the information system management. Sorry, the ISMS, which is Information Security Management System. Again, a set of requirements from this standard that say, hey, you need to guarantee is the confidentiality, the integrity, and accessibility of the data that you're storing. And also the SOC, this is for System Organizations Control, which is inspected by the IACPA, certified by certified public accountant, and the IACPA define is this set of requirements for trust in those systems and organizations, right? And also we have other that are more specific to industry, such as the FedRAMP for security. This is something that we're going to listen a lot. The FedRAMP, man. The FedRAMP is something that we're gonna listen right now a lot, especially when securing cloud services for federal government, especially for any service that are not on the cloud, cryptocurrency or um, any asset that has high impact and high volatility. Uh, so the federal risk authorization management programs. It's a governmental project. It's a governmental program that offer a standard focus on authorization, evaluation, and continuous supervision of security for products and service on the cloud. But this is something that is from the cloud. And again, a good example of this is services that are provided by the cloud. For example, Mercury Bank and all that kind of stuff, they're using now APIs, financial, right? API financial. So what is the Mercury API? So Claw. Okay. So what is the Mercury API that used to provide service to provide financial service to customers? Right? The Mercury API was a banking system platform that provides financial service. Oh. It offers services like virtual physical card, bank accounts, payment processing, and FDIC insurance through partner banks. The company faced regulatory issues in 2023 related to compliance concerns and subsequently shut down its operations. If you're looking for alternative, there are several other banking as a service providers, and this is when things getting very delicate, especially if you're going to develop systems like this, like Synapse, Unit, and Treasury Prime that offer similar API financial infrastructure system. You gotta be kidding me, man. You gotta be kidding me, man. Synapse, let me see, provide me the links of those banking as a service providers. That is huge. That is that is, oh my god. Synapse, Unit, Treasury Prime, formerly Rails Bank, and Stripe Banking. I can verify these links current state since I don't have access to the network, but in any case, let's check if this works. Oh my god. Can you go to this? Synapse Financial Technologies. And they ooh, holy shit. Launching an embedded financial product requires careful consideration of licensing, technology operations, user interface, and more. Check out the financial. And they closed it. I think they went bankrupt. Yeah, they were bankrupt. The fund in April 2020. And that's what happened. And that's what happened. Appointed the bankruptcy trustee say that there were shortfall between Synapse record and those of the bank. Jota Savings, a fintech company which rely on Synapse to manage customer deposit, released financial data in November 2024 showing that 30,725 former customers lost deposit money due to Synapse bankruptcy. They were refunded 11.8 million, a fraction of their 64.9 million deposit. But again, it is because you know that's what happened, man. That's what happened. And a lot of these products and services that they offer is like that. Is you know, they even create this kind of stuff and all the kind of stuff, and you know, again, this is something that's still alive. This is something that is still alive, man. Unit. Treasury Prime. I think the only that survived was Stripe Banking. Welcome Rights Guy here. In getting started, Treasury Prime. For banking, PIN an account. You know, this is very sensitive data, man. And I think a lot of these people actually doing this widely. This is the wild, wild west. Treasury Prime here, delivering the next generation of banking. Treasury Prime here, powering industry-leading organizations. MB Grasshopper Lending Bank, Bangor Saving Banks, and First Bank. Access the world's lending bank operating systems. Like this, one banking software platform, unlock new growth opportunities. 9.3 billion in new deposits. Modernize your core, don't replace it. And this is one of the simulations here. Amount, or account ID, and this, webhooks, and Postman simulations. Build compliance on a secure foundation, direct relationship, compliant partners, proven experience. Fintech, banks, fintech, and regulatory, you know, banks, fintech, and regulatory compliance. So, this might be quite interesting and also an interesting project to build, like that. In the developer sandbox for you to use. This account has been pre-funded with 5K, so you are ready to dive in right in, check an available banks on account. Get a list of all available accounts using the account endpoints for this. So the response should contain several of this. Open API, schemas, account opening, cards, payments, utility, and testing, and pre-launch checking. And here is when you can do all of this kind of stuff. So you can say opening an account, right? Closing an account, creating a filing, ATM transactions, card issuing and fulfillment, issuing a card management, card event, card decline, and payment like this, ACH origin, AC transfers, and all that kind of stuff. So this might be quite interesting to build using now our new React Native knowledge, because again, this is now a unit. Documentation, explore our white label UIs API and guide to start building with unit. So they provide you again accounts, card, payment, lending, and onboarding. So you can see what is the current state of this. So you have now Treasury Prime uh, as well as this unit here, tokens, sandbox testing simulations, applications, manage applications, customers, accounts, wallet, payments, cards, check deposits, check payments, stop payments. Mm-hmm. Fees, rewards, lending, transaction. Again, I don't want to dive deep too much into this. It's actually something that is quite interesting, completely. Very, very interesting. The idea here is to recognize that it's interesting, man. That this is not only for this is not just about is building all of these user interfaces and application and now it is ready. Now it's also recognize that whether you whatever application you're about to build or you're going to build is this needs to follow is regulations and also security here. And I just mentioned is just a tip of an iceberg here. So FedRAMP is one of this. The federal risk authorization management programs to see, hey, this is a government program to provide now a standard evaluation, authorization, and supervisions of the continuous security in their cloud products and services. Now, I really like that the FedRAMP here, the US, actually is on this because this is something that, man, it can be wild. It can be wild. But in any case, we describe it just that list these most common standards, right? And also some of the specific or compliance industry, such as the DSS, the PCI DSS, the payment card industry, data security standard, the HIPAA for the healthcare industry, and also for the bankings, specifically for regions. But in any case, this is just to describe that particular topic, only that. So then we look at how can we now is check our testing for the component size. Following is following is this diagram, right? We talk about unit testing. We're now going to talk about is component testing, and here we use is now VTest testing library, which is a wrapper around the different user interfaces, frameworks on the web, like Angular, or Svelte, or React, or Vue, blah, 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 you name it. The idea is that expose now some of the common operations and user interactions that that users are going to do in our UI. So for example is, hey, it provides now operations for query elements, right? Similar as a down query, right? So we can now is query elements by role buttons, query elements by label text, and all that kind of stuff. And how can we now is provide a wrapper or how can we create a wrapper around these components that is going to now provide is the common functionality in our components. So for example, type-ins, key up, for example, type-ins or key up. So we also look at how can we do that, and when running our component test, because this, in our case, React component has now close or is tightly coupling to other models. So for example, Redux stores. Here is when we use a particular pattern, at least for React applications, and that is the testing provider patterns. So in other words, we just have strap is that logic outside of the provider, all right? And then we can, and then we pass that provider or that store to the component as a props, and then we can test our components in there. So, but the idea here is that we're starting to look at now how this different or this challenge when it comes to make our component easy to test, right? And we're just talking about is React components. But what happens when you do that for other type of components, right? Not only for UI, but also for other different pieces in your applications. And this is when now we're starting to look at the architecture's design, right? This, oh my God, we dive deep into this pit hole. Anyway, so I just briefly mentioned this because this is again open up a new door that is relevant but for other courses, right? So for example, this is now pattern for testing with external dependency. So component isolation with dependency, custom test wrapper as well, mock store creation, something that we're gonna do, but again, we don't want to mock our data. We want is recreate that. And integration testing with MSW, again, something we're going to discuss. But the idea here is to how can we now make our applications easy to test. And this is when now comes the co-clean or clean architecture, hexagon architecture, as a way to now understand how can we make our applications easy to test across different components, right? Because again, this is something that goes deep too much into the realm of the architecture and tech leads, because now we are not dealing with software problems, but with the systemic problems. Okay, and then hey, they define as at least this solutions here, right? And how you can actually integrate with that. Again, this something go beyond the scope of this course, but it's here, right? What? But this is okay. Alistair, from living in Bangladesh, Swedish, Scotland, French, Switzerland, Argentina, and Australia, Alistair Cockburn is a cultural bridge. Oh my God, that's interesting. A mix of engineering and poet, he showed how improving quality of community improve business result. Yep. So in any case, this is not what we care in today's video. In fact, is to now move on to other topic on this course. But again, when it comes to tests, write applications that are easy to test, then we need to think about is how we're going to build them and what is the architecture in that. So we have the clean code or the clean architecture, the hexagon architecture, and all that kind of stuff, right? So in any case, then we look at the accessibility and code coverage. The TLDR is that we can use is a npm package like called Xcore that provide a known check of this common accessibility issue that you have in your applications. Again, it's not a silver bullet, but it can help. And also, the way of how you can now run your or how you can diagnose and run the uh, um, and that is yeah with, so with code coverage give us this now is how much of our code when running how much of our test covers is Jesus. Mm-hmm. All right. How much of our code Mark is a way to replace functionality with this? Exactly. So code coverage is that how can we how can so code coverage is how can we run our code? Jesus no. I don't know. Code coverage. Code coverage. There you go. This is a metric of how much of your code all right how much of your source is tested. That's right. How much of your source are tested. Yeah, how much of your source is tested. Exactly. It's a very useful metric that can help you to assess the quality of your test suite, and we will see how you can get started. However, this code coverage, exactly how code coverage is calculated. How code coverage is calculated. All right. There you got it. How code coverage is calculated. Right. So we have now function. Can I? No. Okay. Exactly. So you have now function coverage. How many of the function defined has been called? Statement coverage has many of the statement in the program has been executed. Branches coverage, how many of the branches of the control structure, if a statement, for instance, has been executed, and how many of the Boolean sub-expression has been tested for a true or false values. Okay, in line coverage, how many of line source has been tested? This metric are usually represented as the number of items actually tested, the items found in your code, and a coverage percentage. Item test and items found. Let me actually write this. let me write this. So the common metrics you might see mentioned in your code coverage report include. So the common metrics involved in your code coverage my yeah, code coverage okay, so the common metrics involved in your code coverage report includes, hey, statement, function coverage, right? Function coverage. How many of the functions defined has been called? How many of the functions defined has been called? Statement coverage. Statement coverage. How many of the statement has been executed? Has been executed. The other is branches coverage. It's like branches coverage, right? How many of the branches of the control structure? How many of the branches of the control structure, of the control structures? For example, if a statement, for example, or switch or while control statement, where there are looping conditions, but for control has been executed, the condition coverage, so how many of the Boolean values, how many of the Boolean sub-expressions, how many of the Boolean sub-expression has been tested for true or false? Has been tested for a true or false. Interesting. Values. And then you have, this is function coverage, statement coverage, branches coverage, and condition coverage. Condition coverage, and this is function, statement, branches. How many of the control structure, if a statement, for example, has been executed, conditions. I know there is another one. Let me see if I can take that. Function, statement, branches, condition. And line coverage. How many of line of source code has been tested? Line of code. Okay. How many? Yeah. How many line of source? How many lines of source code? Yeah. How many lines of source code have been tested? This metric is usually represented as a number of items actually tested. These metrics are related but distinct. In the trivial script below, we have a JavaScript function checking whether or not an argument is a multiple of 10. We'll use that function later to check whether or not 100 is a multiple of 10. It will help us to understand the difference of the code coverage branch. So we have this. We have now a control structure. We have also is a Boolean values, and similar to this, right? And this one. And then you have now, hey, the console log is multiple of 10, 100. So if we do this code coverage, right, it say, hey, statement which is the line of no statement is how many statements in the program has been executed. 5 of 6, at least for this test. Branches, exactly, only one of them actually was tested. The function, which is the function in itself, and the line of code. All of this line of code was evaluated except this one, right? This is because when we run our script, the else statement has not been executed. If we want to get 100 coverage, we could simple add another line, essentially another test, to make sure that all branches of the if statement is used. Function is multiply of 10. And when you now run your code, it's multiply of 10, it's multiply of this. This, of course, will now call this 100 code coverage, right? In this example, we're just logging results in the terminal, but the same principle applies for your run. But again, if you're writing test, that's interesting. If you're writing tests, which is something that we skip over here, if you're writing tests that cover is one single use cases, right? Code coverage doesn't guarantee that your code doesn't have any bugs. It just tells you that how much of your source is tested. That's interesting. How much of your source has been tested? And find the right tool for your project, whether it's Istanbul, simple code, and comparison code here. Focus on unit testing first. And then you have now some of the recommendations. What percentage of code coverage should aim for? A lot of people actually aim for 80, right? But you shouldn't feel the pressure for that. Focus on unit testing first. Unit testing consists in making sure that the individual method of the class and component used by your application are working. They're generally cheap to implement and fast to run. Use coverage reports to identify critical miss in test. Make code coverage part of your continuous integration flow when you are ready. So when you are established, your continuous integration workflow can start following the test if you don't reach a high enough percentage of coverage. Of course, as we said earlier, it will be unreasonable to set the failure threshold too high. And 90% coverage is likely to cause your build to fail a lot. Exactly. Especially if you set a high code coverage, you might not end slowing down your development, but also it's not a guarantee that your code actually works as expected. You are just testing that the code that you're writing pass through. That your code that you're defining pass through. But the logic inside of that is something that is not it's something that can be wrong. Good coverage does not equal good tests. Okay. But again, this is how now code coverage is calculated. And we look at how can we do that here, and also how can we generate artifacts using GitHub Actions for code coverage there. All right. Okay.
So let's talk about like strategies around that. 60. Guess what it would auto update my file to be? 60, right? You know, like especially if you're being very like nuanced with the include, I don't like as much as I'm against, because it's just like one of those things. Like, if you had it at 100 or something really high, and it was like to your point before, like why was line 15 red? Like I'm sure I could spend an hour and figure it out. I'm sure nobody wants to watch that right now. So I'm gonna say I don't know, move on with my life, right? Like you will turn this off if it gets to the point where it's breaking for arbitrary things. But there might be things like I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to like we have a problem. I'm solving a problem, and then you might choose to turn that off. You know what I mean? Once you've gotten to the point where you're no longer worried about it, and that is totally fine as well. But Dustin has a question.
What is the all:"true"?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. Like, if you don't have that on, it will only check the coverage of the files hit by your test runner, right? Which means, by definition, there will be some files that have 0% test coverage because no test file ever imports them. Because like Vitest is looking for star, like you can actually, I know this is, it's looking in this case. I have some weird things in this one. There's a default exclude that you can see. But like for the regular ones, I'm avoiding the svelte tests. Weird stuff in this repo. But like it will only, like Vitest will load anything, usually with like star.test.ts, whatever. And it'll look at those imports and annotate everything. Files that are never imported by a test aren't ever accounted if you have all set to false, which is the default. So all true, like will also stew everything.
Mm-hmm.
Files that are never imported by a test aren't ever accounted if you have all set to false, which is the default. So all true, like we'll also do a file system scan, try to collect them all that would have matched, and then analyze them as well. Which means you will get some things that may, like it's tricky because you will then end up with things you never aspired to have test coverage. Like again, like vitest.config.ts. That is a file that I will never test. Right? I don't want to test, I don't care. And I have it in the ignore one. So if you do all, this grows. Right? If you don't have all on, you can probably get rid of this, right? And so it's like, how much pain do you want in what direction? I don't care. And I have it in the ignore one. So if you do all, this grows. Right? If you don't have all on, you can probably get rid of this, right? And so it's like, how much pain do you want in what direction? A lot of these things depend on the like unique, like all good code bases have a lot of things in common. All terrible code bases are unique and special in their own way. And this is why we're kind of taking a very like wide like philosophical stance here because
Mm-hmm. So all good code bases has common stuff. Has a lot of things in common. All good code bases have a lot of things in common. All bad code bases in terms of maintainability maintainability, okay, and all exactly. So all good code bases have a lot of things in common. All bad code bases in terms of maintainability are unique in their own specific way.
Good code bases have a lot of things in common. All terrible code bases are unique and special in their own way.
Are unique and special in their own ways.
And this is why we're kind of taking a very like wide like philosophical stance here because like the terrible code base that you were dealing with, if it was that easy to solve by applying a few things, it would have been fixed by now, right? Like you could have probably just even run something that like like Prettier can handle all the formatting issues. You're left with that like nested, like 6 deep nested conditional. You know what I mean? With 3-4 loops in there, right? Like you have to deal with that one. Prettier will definitely move that semicolon back for you though. And yeah, use the tools appropriately. And so yeah, like we're kind of casting a wide net in that sense. But like I said, I think what could be interesting, and there are services where you could, like I think CodeCov is one, Coveralls, which I like as a name, like will also integrate with your build process and like chart it out over time. And again, to the point we made earlier, the number, that's dangerous. A graph that shows it going down is possibly useful. You know what I mean? Like saying like, we have to have 80. And I think Amazon does this, right, where it's like a Bezos thing where it can't drop below 90 or something like that.
So, philosophical question about that. I think you already answered it, but I want to just clarify. When
Yeah.
you say the 80-20 rule, for example,
yeah.
you're not saying just look at it. If it says 80%, we're good. You got to actually look at what 80% has been covered.
Yeah, it's like, are you
So it could
covering the
be-
right 80%,
The
right?
20% that's not covered could be the most important.
Yeah, it could be
stuff.
the 80% of what your code does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like we joked before about that agony for like performance, right? Like, like if the like most hit code path in real world production usage is not covered, that's probably more important than like if you had 80% of like files that don't really get used all that often, right? And like, also, any number that you read on the internet should be treated with suspicion because there might be a bunch of backend engineers who have like microservices where everything is really like condensed down, and we have to deal with like a bunch of state and like Safari hacks. It used to be IE hacks, right? And like things are tougher over here.
Viewports and
What's that?
viewports and
And
devices.
viewports and like weird like Firefox does this a little bit differently, and macOS wants to put a glowing, that kind of stuff. And like I said, this is only doing what Vitess does. So like you could have an amazing set of like, to the question we got from after lunch, you could have an amazing set of like browser-based tests, and maybe someone's be like, yo, there's a tool that like merges these things. Like I don't know about it because like it's usually working against the built assets at that point. We don't have access to this anymore. But like you could have something that is like covering it effectively as well. I worked at a company a few years ago that like they hired 3 full-time people whose job it was to like clone down the repo and spin it up and do things. Right, and so like get to 100% code coverage, like there's 3 people whose job it is. But yeah, and so it's a useful tool. But the coverage report I think is super interesting. And if you want to do programmatic stuff with it, like there are different reporters that you can use. I think reporter, and I think I can do it as an array. Yeah, you see that autocomplete happening in there? The modern era is really great, as I've said before. Like, this is like when people who wrote compiled languages are like, the compiler tells me everything and finds all the problems. I'm like, must seem nice. And I feel like I'm starting to live in that world. These are some of the ones built in. Do I know what they all are? No. TeamCity seems like a thing that I should know what it is. I don't. JSON, if you want to if you were going to build your own, I want to track it over time, right? Because yeah,
But again, the value proposition of this, all right, is that for testing critical business, okay. Yeah, this is the value proposition of this. This is the value proposition. Is the value proposition of this. Some reflections. Yep, and some reflections here.
So JSON might be what you choose to do. That I read as I was talking.
So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.